child has gone missing, and the boy's mother is at her wit's end. Simone has been missing for months now, and his mother Laura has been experiencing odd occurrences at the new home she purchased for her family with the hopes that she could be a mother to dozens of abandoned children. As she starts to open her mind, the truth is revealed to her, and it's all too shocking. In the 2007 Spanish horror film, The Orphanage. I'm Connor Eyzaguirre.
I'm Cristian Aguilar.
And this is Filmgazm. Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to the Filmgazm podcast. I'm joined today once again by Cristian Aguilar, the new guy who has picked today's episode, which I believe is our first Spanish language film. Not for lack of trying. There's a lot of world out there and even more movies. I'm excited to dig into this film. This has been on my radar for quite some time. I never quite checked it out, and I'm glad here it is. So why did you decide to bring The Orphanage to the show?
Yeah, so I'm from the border. I'm Mexican, and so growing up with Spanish media has definitely shaped my sort of upbringing, and being exposed to being able to watch things kind of in two languages, has kind of influenced the way I view media. But this is a classic movie in my mind. I think a lot of people will be introduced to this movie. At least my experience is through like Spanish language classes, like in public school. This and another movie tend to be, the top two picks. But no, I think that this is a really good kind of introduction to the other side of the world. And this is, of course, a really, well-known movie, especially in the US. So I think this is a good introduction to kind of more different foreign sort of movies, and to kind of go into that. But no, this movie has had a special place in my heart. I've owned it on DVD, watched it a dozen times, but this rewatch has been my most recent in probably 5 years. But no, I think The Orphanage checks a lot of boxes for me that we'll kind of go into later, but definitely something I wanted to delve into on the podcast.
Nice. Yeah, I love when people bring their personal films to the show. You can always feel in the discussion when something's really personal. I can't imagine watching this in public school. I just that's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know what. I'm pretty sure we would watch this. And there's a movie called La Misma Luna that's about, immigration. That's also very popular. It's also very heavy. But I remember this movie in Spanish class for some reason. And it's really dark. And now as an adult and rewatching it, I don't think we understood really quite what's going on. But you often chose this one because horror is a lot cooler than sad immigration story. That kind of hit a little too close to home for some people. No, but this was definitely an awesome pick. And then we have on the DVD in my house, so this is a favorite of me and my brothers for sure.
I remember my high school. I didn't take Spanish in high school. I had fulfilled my requirement in middle school, and all we watched was clips from the teacher's edition of the book of this is what a library is like and things like that. And it was just ridiculous. I really wish we'd watch some actual Spanish films, and that probably would have helped me learn the language a little bit, because I don't remember any of my Spanish.
No, yeah, this was definitely a stark contrast to sort of like the fake educational novellas that they would show.
Yeah.
And I think something about this film is typically I don't really like Spanish, kind of Castilian Spanish. I think it's very proper. Sometimes it can be kind of posh. It's definitely a different language than the Spanish that I know. It's very like rural and like not proper at all. But no, I don't get that sort of sentiment. Like, I don't think Laura's character comes out as she doesn't come out too posh. She doesn't come out too proper, her upbringing and sort of, the way everyone seems very, I think it's very accessible for people in Spanish, because it doesn't play off as, this sort of Spain elite movie, more of just a movie that's in Spanish that's really enjoyable. I think, and then it makes it more accessible for especially like Latin American audiences. I think that's a distinction that's to be made. No, but I really enjoyed the being able to see kind of what they say in English and then knowing what they say in Spanish. And it's pretty straight to the point. Yeah, I think they do a really good job about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's very accessible. I've never had a problem with like subtitles or like I love good stories. That's all that matters to me. I don't care what language the movie's in. I just want to enjoy it. But it is weird that in this country there are people who are like, "Oh, I don't watch foreign films." Like unless it's happening at a McDonald's, I don't give a shit. It's it's weird. It's like
Yeah.
people just don't like to read, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I grew up watching anime and stuff in different languages. But yeah, no, I think if you haven't seen this movie, definitely give it a shot if this is sort of your intro to sort of any sort of foreign language or especially Spanish movies.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good place to start. So the film was conceived in 1996 by screenwriter Sergio G. Sanchez, who would go on to write the 2012 Oscar-nominated disaster drama The Impossible, which he also did with J.A. Bayona. They became kind of a duo for a while. Sanchez wanted to make something in the vein of the films he loved as a kid, namely Poltergeist, The Omen, and Rosemary's Baby. And I'm like, Jesus, as a kid, I didn't see those films until I was like in my teenage years. As a kid, I was like, just carefully, like, I don't want to be scared. I was staying away from that stuff.
No, The Omen and Rosemary's Babies. I have Rosemary's Baby. Sorry, I have distinct memories of being the scariest movies ever as a kid, and like seeing like those are movies that I've watched through my fingers, and so that's the kind of the memories I have of them, especially The Omen. But we'll kind of go, yeah. I think being the Catholic upbringing, I think anything involving sort of paranormal, sort of anything involving the devil or anything sort of occult makes it 10 times scarier. And my Catholic mother made sure that I was terrified of sitting through those movies.
That's wild. There's a few guys on the team who've had similar upbringings and they have similar stories. I was raised completely outside the church. I never had any religious upbringing, and those films are still absolutely terrifying. But I can imagine, like, with that upbringing, that they've got to be amplified. But yeah, as a kid, I watched Signs at the movies. It scared the living hell out of me, and I was very conscious to avoid horror films because I did not like the way that felt. So I was like, nope, stay away from me. Nope. I knew the cases, I knew the gist because my family were big into horror, and I was just like, nope. And then one day, I don't know what happened. I just like decided, no, okay. And I never looked back. But I just find it hilarious that Sanchez was just like, yeah, these films I grew up with, some of the greatest, scariest movies of all time. Like, yeah, no sweat.
Yeah, when I had read that, I definitely saw the influence for sure with this film. I think anything dealing with kids and sort of the darker tones that this movie takes with disease and of course like being an orphan and those sort of themes of physical disability and the way that we view the disabled. I can definitely see the influence as far to like some working with kids and especially depicting kids as dead. It's such a there's so much red tape with that in film, and so I think being able to pull it off and being able to pull it off in a way that comes off not just as like kind of like shock horror of seeing like a dead kid on the screen, but rather like, okay, how this kid's death is meaningful to the overall story. What does that play? How does that affect the characters? I think Bayona does a really great job kind of depicting that in a way that's meaningful to this overall story.
Well, it's another thing I like from foreign cinema is the lines that these films are able to cross. Because in America, if you don't have the Hollywood ending, you're not going to get funding. Like, there's no way an American film could end with a dead child and a neglectful mother responsible for that child's death and then her suicide. Yeah. Like, short of like an Oscar Beatty, Steven Spielberg produced movie that can afford it, you're not going to see that. And for it to matter, that's significant too. I love that it's not for shock value. It's very much it makes sense for the story. It's cause and effect, and just the pain in her eyes when she realizes what exactly happened and that it was her fault. You can't like, oh my God, it's remarkable. But yeah, I think Bayona really pulled it off. So obviously Peter Pan, large influence on this movie as well. We literally just did Hook on the podcast like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's weird how this shit just kind of molds together. It's all one big puzzle we're constantly trying to solve. And
yeah, I saw that. I saw that you had posted that Hook episode, and I was like, "Oh, this fits so weirdly perfectly." Because like we'll go more into it in depth, but like the themes that they explores of never aging, it's kind of like this dark retelling of what you think, the story about of Peter Pan and the Lost Boys are, and these children being lost, the orphans being lost.
well, there's this whole like theory that Peter Pan is supposed to represent an angel who is helping recently deceased children cross into the afterlife, which is just Jesus. But this movie definitely plays on that theory. And interesting, like, I can see on a second viewing, just noticing all the Peter Pan things and being like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. Ouch. So J.A. Bayona was able to secure funding from Oscar-winning filmmaker Guillermo del Toro, who was offered to co-produce the project because he believed in it. And, throw in his name, Guillermo del Toro Presents, really gave this film an international boost, I think, because he's one of the biggest names in horror, I think, since the 90s.
Definitely. I think that getting that cosign that really shows kind of the character of Del Toro. I think that he's willing to take a chance on these things. And for a lot of my peers or introducing this film to them, it's a chance to a more mainstream audience of like Spanish language films, and just sort of a different type of horror than I think that was going on in the 2007. I don't think nothing really kind of dealt with this subject matter to this extent. Especially, I don't think it was pulled off in a way that this movie handles sort of the subject matter. But now I think that Del Toro is really responsible to the overall accessibility of this movie and the success in the U.S.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's ironic that Del Toro, despite having made so many recognizable and successful movies, continues to have to fight tooth and nail to get anything produced. It's amazing. Like, the studios are always against him. Like, even his recent film, Nightmare Alley, was deliberately set to release against Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, they moved it to that date, almost like they just wanted to shut him up and, tank his movie so he'll go away. And
yeah, I think, I really love his work. I grew up watching Hellboy, and then I was excited to see his version of The Hobbit until that kind of fell through. But it's interesting that Del Toro's sort of initial concepts from this movie, and we mentioned sort of the global audience. I had read that they're like looking to possibly do an American remake of this. I don't know if you found that also.
Oh yeah, I got some stuff to say about that later. Yeah, I can't stand Americanized remakes of foreign films. They never get it right. They always go for the wrong message. It's terrible. There's a couple in production right now that I know are going to tank. Like, they got a Train to Busan remake scheduled, and come on.
Yeah, I think we as a society need to be a little bit more open to kind of enjoying the originals in the original format, and sort of. No, I totally agree. I don't think this could be pulled off for an American audience. I think that they would handle the subject matter incorrectly, and it would end up with more controversy and sort of tarnish the name that the Orphanage has. I think just even the connection to it.
I agree. Understandably, Hollywood's always been kind of, they don't like dead kids. There's one of the examples that I can bring up is Cujo from 1983. Cujo is pretty straightforward to the book, apart from the ending. In the book, the boy in the car dies of heat exhaustion before they can get out. But in the movie, he miraculously comes back to life after they get out of the car, despite having been pretty much dead for like half an hour. So it's just, Hollywood doesn't want to. They don't want to go there. They just don't. And I understand that, it's not exactly, positive for people, but sometimes a story needs some punch. It needs there need to be consequences, and that the consequences don't get much higher than that. So I feel like if they remake The Orphanage, that kid's gonna make it up.
Yeah, I think the timeline would be way different. Apparently with the remake, they were going to focus more on sort of the original ideas that they had. I think Bayona had cut out some more information that were focusing on the 5 orphans that were there when like Laura was an orphan herself, and I think each one of them kind of had their own sort of backstory. But I think Bayona pushed to really have the focus being more on Laura's story as a mother who's grieving. So I think that remake would have touched more on the other orphans, and also had read somewhere that Benigna, the fake social worker who's being Tomas's mother, that he was told to keep her alive. And so to kind of play, I guess, a different sort of role in the movie, sort of towards the end, maybe as a final villain or just a completely different. So I think, it would be really interesting to see where they would have took that movie if they went through a different sort of route, but using sort of the same players, the sort of same themes of the orphanage, the orphans, and then of course Benigna as a character.
I'd be down to see that stuff explored in a sequel or a prequel by the same guys, but I just don't want them to Americanize this because I feel like we'll lose so much.
No, I agree. For sure.
So J.A. Bayona would go on to direct The Impossible, A Monster Calls, and his biggest project to date, Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. He's also set to direct 2 episodes of Amazon's upcoming series, The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power, which I'm hesitant. $456 million price tag on that show. It better work out for them.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So something I can't imagine that this movie does well is it uses its score to its advantage. And I think it's really great that kind of Bayona has that experience, at least. Because for me, a huge part of Lord of the Rings, anything, is the music that accompanies it. And that's so huge to the world building. So I'm looking forward to see what he does in the introductory episodes of that. Because that's, world building's huge when they're investing so much money. They need to establish to the fans who don't know about the timeline, hey, you're not going to see Frodo Baggins, you're not going to see Bilbo. This is years before. And so I'm fingers crossed. I'm really hopeful for that series. But I guess we'll have to wait.
What do you think of Bayona's take on Jurassic Park?
It made me sad. I think the scene of where they're leaving the island, of course, and the like you see the dinosaurs dying. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I cared about them so much. I thought he tried to tie in, sort of modern perceptions of like conservation, and I don't know if it necessarily worked for Jurassic Park. I didn't think the movie was bad. I'm excited to see the next Jurassic World. I had a bad taste in my mouth with those movies. I just kind of thought they're just sticking Chris Pratt everywhere. Which I don't know how I feel. Definitely like a 6 is what I would put it.
Okay,
6,
fair
7,
enough.
Yeah.
Fallen Kingdom, I think, is the most forgettable Jurassic Park movie, which is a shame. But it's got its moments. I mean, the whole Indoraptor thing was cool. I love Ted Levine. I thought destroying Isla Nublar was a very creative idea, and I hope they make good on it in Dominion. But we will see. Let's talk about the cast. I hope my pronunciation is okay. I'm trying my best. Belén Rueda plays Laura, former orphan who buys the orphanage she grew up in and adopts Simone. She's a popular Spanish actress who was also in The Sea Inside, The Body, Julia's Eyes, and Savage Grace, among other film and TV roles. And I think she's a great protagonist. I feel for her the whole time. I think it's an interesting idea to buy the orphanage you grew up in and try to turn it into like a like a home for like a few kids. It's like she's just like, I just want like 5. It was weird, but I get it.
Yeah, something I thought that would have helped her character a little bit more in thinking of this, this recent rewatch was kind of explaining like her situation if like her and her husband couldn't have kids.
Well, we never find out like who adopted her, like how did she get out of here? What was her
Yeah.
upbringing like what brought her back to this orphanage?
Mhm.
I feel it was just kind of like, unnecessary setup that I guess they felt we didn't need.
Yeah,
But
I think a little bit more exposition on that part. And then like I think the ties to the orphanage could be explored a little bit more of how much he really remembers of it, and if like maybe there was an orphanage maiden or someone that she really connected to that kind of influenced her life. Because you see at the end of the movie, she becomes that sort of matron figure, and so I think exploring that matron figure in her life that would even make her want to have that same sort of goal um, to house disabled children.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I do want to say I really like that this film that Tomas was not the bad guy. Because I was fully expecting like, oh, the deformed kid is going to be like a Jason Voorhees type bad guy here. But no, he was just like the kids' ghosts were just like, hey, Tomas, let's play. Like nobody had a problem with Tomas. And I like that. He wasn't a scary kid. He was just a lonely kid.
Yeah, I think with when I read that they try to keep Benigna, Tomas's mother, alive, I kind of thought that that would have fell into sort of like this weird Pamela Voorhees kind of type character. That wouldn't work in the movie like this. I think it's really important to not just portray, disabled people, especially disabled children, are always kind of portrayed as, the horror monsters. I think it's super problematic. Um, and with a movie in 2007, things like that were still very much coming out, but portraying Tomas in a light that, he's very much a victim. And these kids are very much playing and, they're living out their childhood and the afterlife. They're essentially kind of helping Laura to the end. Like if there's any true villain, it's definitely Benigna.
You mean the
Which
lady who murdered 5 children? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's definitely Benigna, but I feel like they don't towards the end of the movie, you don't get that sort of like they're not like damn her, I feel like that was the one sort of cut off of this movie I didn't necessarily like. But no,
Well,
I thought that yeah, Tomas is super, yeah, him being not just another sort of monster grotesque figure. You don't need a Jason Voorhees, you don't need a Freddy Krueger type character for a movie like this.
I'm sure like Benigna never gets her kind of comeuppance from the kids because I don't think they understood what happened. They don't know they were murdered. They just woke up in another world with Tomas and they've just been playing around there till this other kid showed up. Like, I don't think they understand that they're dead.
Yeah, I think so I don't know. I think that because not to get too much in the nitty gritty, but I think that because when the medium's there and she's hearing the kids sort of cry out and they're like, why are you killing it?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think maybe they are aware of, themselves being dead. And they don't have that sort of rest because they were killed out of, this anger from Benigna. But a lot of these questions, could have been explored a little bit further. And I think the ending is very fitting and it makes you feel like, okay, it's like you get a deep sigh, towards the end of the movie of, you really, these people are at peace. But no, I think that maybe a little bit more exposition on Benigna's character as a villain and her, because, she literally gets hit by a ambulance. So
Yeah.
that sort of arc ends right there. So
Yeah, there's a lot of shock moments in this I was not expecting. That was definitely one of them.
yeah, definitely.
Next up, we've got Fernando Cayo, who plays Carlos, Laura's husband, who doesn't really do anything in this movie. He's just kind of there and ultimately suffers the worst loss ever when, he leaves his wife alone for 2 days, comes back, finds his wife dead with their dead son in his arms and has to move on. So, Jesus, Carlos, poor guy.
Yeah, I think he's really the sort of the bad luck Brian, if you will, of this whole film.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to pleading with Laura, like, let's move on. Like, we as a couple, we can make it, so many couples. And they're there at a bereavement center trying to get some help. And he's really pushing for them to move forward and, looking to the future they have. But it's kind of one of those things, that motherly connection that Laura has with Simon. Like, she's not the same person after that loss. And her real desire is to be with her son. And I think, towards the end of the movie, Carlos, that smile of relief ties back to the bereavement center scene where that other person is sharing their story of how they see them and they're happy and they're content and they know that they moved on. Yeah. So good for Carlos to finally get that at the end. But of course, the stakes are so sad.
I don't think I ever, off the top of my head, I can't recall any fatherly connection to a missing child movie. Like, that's not like an action movie. I would like to see that explored more. Like, why couldn't they have followed the ghosts together as a couple, like as parents? I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, I agree. I think that Laura does become sort of a badass towards the end of the movie. She's really strong-willed, and she's trying everything to get back to her son. And so she really putting that whole, sort of montage of her, putting back the orphanage and, going back to such a troubled childhood, living in an orphanage. And, of course, I'm sure that I'm not an orphan, but I'm sure being adopted, that's sort of the start of your life in a sense, of a different life, and so having to go back to that. She's definitely empowered and a badass sort of female lead.
But it is weird that we are kind of led to believe that she didn't have a troubled childhood. Like, she loved her time at the orphanage. She missed her friends. Like, that, she had a good time there. So, what's the source of this pain?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, definitely some more exposition could have helped out. Because, I guess the only sort of scene we get is her playing, sort of like a red light, green light type of game. And you don't necessarily see the sort of the other troubles. I also wonder, it seemed like almost every orphan there kind of had this physical disability. And I wonder if maybe there was something else wrong with Laura that they didn't explore.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, because disabilities aren't always, physical. And so maybe, something in a different light could have been, her connection to, because I think disability is really at the back burner of this film. That's kind of fueling some of the commentary, if you will, of this movie of not viewing disabled. She's very much dedicating her life to helping disabled children. So I wonder how much that kind of plays into it.
Yeah, we never really learn where the drive comes from, and I think a little bit of dialogue explaining Laura's motivations would have been nice. Fernando Cayo also was in The Skin I Live In, The Counselor, and the recent Netflix series Money Heist, which I've heard is pretty good. Roger Princip plays Simone, the poor child who disappears. This was only his second gig as an actor, and he's since appeared in The Blind Sunflowers, Foresters, and an upcoming film called Unlimited Power, among others. And the kid's okay. I mean, he's playing a kid, so he's good. There's not really much I got to say about Simone.
Yeah, he definitely plays like that whole scene where she slaps him. Like, oh my god, that's pulled out straight out of the Brownsville Mall for me. We're hearing these whiny kids who sound so entitled.
Well, he slapped the cake out of her hands. I mean, that's
yeah. Especially the name. I feel like I've definitely heard that in the mall. Someone being Simone or Maximiliano behave. But no, I think that he does a good job. I think child actors deserve their flowers too. And for what it's worth, I don't know if I could pull that off at his age. So, I'll give him his credit.
Yeah, good point. What would 6-year-old me do in this situation? Yeah, stare at the camera, probably.
Yeah.
Montserrat Carula plays Benigna, the most overprotective mother since Pamela Voorhees. Definitely some influence there. She was in a lot of Spanish TV shows and random gigs over the years until her death in 2020 at 90 years old from natural causes. And the bit that she's in the movie, really freaky. She's got this 1,000-yard stare in her eyes that is just so creepy. She reminded me of somebody off the X-Files. I thought it was the same actress. It was not. But there was an episode where like the school board were worshiping the devil because the kids are being naughty, and the devil shows up, and it's this substitute teacher called Mrs. Paddock who's like just got that 1,000-yard stare, and I'm like, wait a minute, is that her? And it wasn't, but damn, they look really similar.
No, I think this movie explores a couple things that I'm terrified of that made it really scary for me the first couple of watches, which is kids. And as a parent, I can say that kids are terrifying because they don't know their own strength. Especially that scene where she gets like kind of attacked, in the restroom. And then old people, and not to be ageist and not to discriminate, but I think, it's that kind of connection, especially the way they portray Benigna. She's very, she's creepy and on purpose. And just sort of the backstory of her being a fake social worker and coming up with this whole overprotectiveness. Yeah, there's nothing scarier than an overprotective mother. And especially in horror, I think that, reigns true.
See, what freaked me out, and this is a legit fear of mine, is being tricked, like not knowing, talking to someone and thinking they're somebody, but really they've been lying to you. When the cops say like, we couldn't find a social worker with that name, like that got under my skin. Like, who was that lady? And yeah, I love little things like that just, just dance around it. And then just, of course, her getting hit by the bus and her jaw. And just, oh my God.
Yeah, that whole rigor mortis or whatever you'd want to call it, of she reaches out, like that jump scare still gets me. But it's a jump scare in a movie that doesn't need jump scares, but it's pulled out perfectly. And then, you think you're safe. You think you're not going to see removed jaw. And then they pull off the sheet and then you see full frontal removed jaw. It's kind of a shock value, but it looks great. I think if you're going for that, the makeup artist definitely pulled that off for sure.
Yeah. Well, I also just, I love the way they tell us about her crimes, the way we learn that she poisoned the children who got her son killed. Just that, and then finding bags of bones. Like, good God, man. Like it was all done so well, just so eerie. Oof. Yeah,
and it makes you wonder kind of, she knew that Laura had bought the house and sort of, she knew so much about her. So, it begs the question if, let's say a prequel were to be made, if has anyone else tried to buy the house in the years that, since, and sort of how that plays out and the amount of her crimes. And I think that's one of the, I'm calling for exposition, but I think one of the best things this movie does is it doesn't need to put all the cards, it's a part of the story is having you learn as you go, sort of the depths of the story. It doesn't need to, spit it right out and scream it at you. It kind of, you're along for the journey. I think that's one of the boxes that this checks for me. It's kind of like a murder mystery in an extent, but you kind of uncover this larger story that's unfolding that Laura has the connection to.
Yeah, I think a good ghost movie is built on mystery.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I mean, with a haunted house film, there was only really so much you can do to be original. And I think it's all been done at this point. And what you can do now is just take bits and pieces from everything to try and craft something as original as you possibly can. And I thought The Orphanage did that very well. Finally, we've got Geraldine Chaplin, who plays Aurora, the medium. She is the daughter of legendary comedic actor Charlie Chaplin. And she's appeared in such films as Dr. Zhivago, Talk to Her, Nashville, Home for the Holidays, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Holy shit. I'm like such a huge Chaplin fan. So I was very excited, like, oh my God, it's his daughter. And I was reading about how she was discovered on something. I'm like, she wasn't discovered at all. She was Charlie Chaplin's daughter.
No, I did not. I did not get that at all. I did not read into that. But that's crazy. I did not. Yeah, you don't. I feel like you don't connect sort of. In my mind, Chaplin is so far removed from anything close to 2007. So,
Well, he had
wow,
kids
I
well
didn't
into
know
his
that.
80s. That's the thing. So like,
Okay,
there's a lot. He's got a couple living children and a lot of living grandchildren.
gotcha. No, yeah, that's awesome that she's in this.
Yeah, really cool. I literally just bought Criterion editions of the Gold Rush and Modern Times. So it's weird now. So much of what's going on in my life at the moment seems to be somewhat connected to this movie. Like we literally just did a disability study in our class.
No, I didn't do that on purpose, but I thought this was so funny because it fits within the mentality of sort of the stuff that we talked about in class. But no, I think it fits. We're in the right mindset for it, so definitely it's the best.
Yeah, for sure. The Orphanage has an IMDb score of 7.4, Rotten Tomatoes score of 87%, which is pretty rare for horror films, regrettably. It was a big hit, grossing $78 million on a budget of only $4 million. In fact, it was so successful, New Line Cinema immediately bought the rights for an American remake that thankfully has not yet happened. Hopefully it stays in production hell. With that, let's talk some highlights of The Orphanage. First things first, when we learn that Simone is HIV positive, that's something I don't think I've seen in a film, is an HIV positive child who is adopted and loved. So
no, I think it's super important because it doesn't tell you where Laura's from. It doesn't tell you where Simone's from, so he could be from any part of an impoverished country. He could be from Spain. But I think just that inclusion of him, like a HIV positive child, it really throws you off your feet, because you feel for Simone and you feel it adds a sort of nuance to, it's not just Simone finding out that he's adopted, I feel like that's something that maybe he could, it's going to take some time and it's going to, be with him the rest of his life. But adding on top of that, the living with a disease like that and learning at 6 years old, I mean, one of the hardest parts of this movie, I think, from Laura's perspective, is finding where it all kind of spirals downhill, is where he finds out in this elaborate game how he's HIV positive and how he's adopted. So it's 2 bombs dropped on a 6-year-old kid at once. And so it kind of, it's fitting, if I was 6 years old and I learned that your whole life was basically a lie, yeah, I'd go hide in this creepy house too. It makes you feel for him, in a different light, and so it adds a lot of nuance to the character. I thought it was, I think in a different movie, that inclusion of his, disease could have been pulled off in a way that's just like, why? But I thought, it added to his character in a way. It also added a timeline to him being missing, because he needed that daily. Yeah, he needed that daily medication. So it kind of made you understand that he's probably dead when Laura thinks he's alive. And so that kind of separates it from an abduction movie where you have hope. But this is sort of like, okay, it's 6 months, he doesn't have that medicine. It's not looking good for him. And so it's a different perspective that you get from Laura. I think it's a necessary inclusion.
And then knowing that the last time she saw him, she slapped him for being disrespectful. Like, Jesus, I can't imagine the look in his eyes when she slaps him and he's just got his hand on his cheek and the tears are welling up. Oh my God.
Yeah, props to that kid, because he sold that. You feel so bad for him, and it's the mix of the frustration from Laura, and as a parent now, this is the first time watching this movie as a parent, so I think it's, I don't know how I would deal with any of that. But
don't buy an old orphanage. That's a good start.
Yeah, glad yeah, it's definitely. I'm scared of this house I live in currently, and it was built in 2017. So, no, I think that, yeah, I think if you watch it from the perspective of as a kid and watching it from the perspective of Laura, it's such a struggle that I think it makes it relatable to this movie. Not everyone has to tell their kid that they're HIV positive or adopted, but you do have those interactions with your child that, hey, here life's tough, and it's that part of that giving reality to your kids and piecemeal is like kind of the plan, I think, for all parents. And then when it doesn't go that way and you're forced to tell your kids like the dark truth that, hey, life kind of sucks sometimes, it makes you so uncomfortable. So I think that makes it, at least that scene was super relatable for me to be like, okay, I feel for her as a parent.
I agree, but I did laugh when they're giving the talk to him, and the first thing he asks is Santa Claus real? Like, that's the first clarification he wanted. Like, they're being truthful. I'm going to get the answers I need.
Yeah, it's like I think sometimes they put subject matter for kids. It's like, they get too in depth about stuff. But no, he's a real kid. He's really concerned about his world is, Santa Claus. His world is his imaginary friends. His world is his family.
I don't have kids. I do want kids, and I hope to one day have kids. And when I do, I am very interested to see which films change. I'm very interested to see how that happens, because so as of now, only a few people on my team don't have kids, and I've heard from them how certain things are completely different in cinema now. The way they think about certain movies that's completely 180'd, and I'm excited to see what happens there. Yeah, I mean, that's not the only reason I want kids, but that's one of the things I've thought about.
Yeah, I think you just want kids to relate to Pamela Voorhees and get her monsters rampage. No, I think it definitely changes your perspective. I think you're willing to do so much for kids. You really do anything for your kids, especially like when you think about sort of the mortal sort of things that we can do for our kids. You want to protect them, and what does that mean? You're willing to risk your life, but are you willing to take a life for your kids? That's such a deep, these things that go through your mind, because it's this responsibility that you've never had before. But no, this movie is one of the first that's really, my kids only. I've only been a parent for about 2 years now, so this is one of the first movies that was like, wow. At first, I thought Laura was just this neglectful mother, but now I think I kind of see more of the nuance of the movie. I think
that's good, yeah, because there's a couple ways you could say this, but honestly, who's going to immediately think, "Oh, my kid's in the walls because I didn't know about this hidden room"? No one's going to go straight to that. Like,
yeah,
but shit. Definitely look around your house and try to find any hidden areas just in case. So when Benigna shows up, the first time, a social worker comes to the house, I'm immediately thinking like, is there like a trial period here? Has there been issues with abuse? But then I'm like, oh no, she just lied her way into this house. That was a good way to kind of make you start to question your loyalty to Laura thus far. As you hear social worker, you immediately start thinking the worst.
Yeah, definitely. You think that, maybe Laura is the neglectful mother, and there's sort of some of these other things going on. I think the first act of this movie is one of the things that I wrote down was, it plays out as just like a normal abduction story, kind of. It reminds any sort of abduction story reminds me of Gone Girl. When you don't know necessarily who, there's not necessarily one bad guy. There's more nuance to the situation, things like that. And the first act really kind of paints that picture, and then the second and third act take it a whole different direction. But no, you kind of see the pain. It's like, okay, maybe he really did get abducted.
Gone Girl is one I really want to do on the show. That movie's so layered and crazy. And you pick sides throughout the whole movie. You don't really know where your loyalties lie. Even at the end of it, you're like, she's fucking crazy, but he's an asshole. So like, great movie.
I love the movies that, they make you question your kind of ethical and moral codes of, who do you side with? And it kind of, you picking those sides kind of shows kind of your own personalities. You're able to make that personal connection. Now that's also the movie I reference anytime I see sort of the abduction, because it's like, it's like becoming the crime kind of thriller, and you're not too sure what's going on.
I got a special Blu-ray that came with an Amazing Amy book. So it's like, but the book tells the story of Gone Girl. It's like Amy disappeared and nobody knows where she is. And it was like, it's crazy.
I love that.
So I guess the big party, was that supposed to be Simone's birthday party?
No, so I thought that was so what happens from my understanding of the film is that's going to be, so they're talking about his imaginary friends, Watson and Pepe, who Simone kind of develops, I think, being an only child, you have to, and then they're moving, he wants to play games, but of course his mom's busy about to run this, residence for, disabled children. And then his dad's a doctor. So I think, his parents are really busy. So he develops this imaginary friends like any kid would. And what they do is they're inviting these disabled children to home. I think those are the kids that that Laura's planning to take care of. Because when he goes missing, one of the things she says is, if how are they going to trust me with their own kids? And so kind of
that was like an open house kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly. And something in the background of the movie is not only she lost her kid, but she lost her essentially her livelihood, because her whole life was dedicated. I mean, you make an investment on a creepy old house, that's gonna burn when it doesn't go your way. So she's lost everything essentially in her life. But it's not stated out front, but yeah, she's definitely she's hurting, and I'm sure in multiple ways. But yeah, it's supposed to be from an open house of sorts. For these disabled children to kind of introduce themselves, and it was supposed to be something he was looking forward to, because those were going to be his friends. Those were going to be his first friends, and so it kind of cuts even worse, when he left because he felt so alone. That's terrible.
Shit. Yeah, that makes way more sense. Yeah, damn. There's so many movies and true stories and books that explain that buying creepy old real estate is always a bad idea. I don't know. I would never do that.
Yeah, maybe that's a pro of the housing crisis, is that we'll never be able to afford creepy old homes, just high-rise apartments.
Yeah, hauntings are going to decrease by like 80%, so because we can't afford to go there.
Yeah, no one our age can afford houses anymore, so there's no worries.
That's incredibly sad, but also, you know what, kind of reassuring. Yeah,
silver lining.
I freaking cringed when Laura got her fingers crushed in the bathroom door. I hate fingers getting crushed in doors. Oh, that was Tomas has some strength.
Yeah, Tomas really slammed that door, and like I thought the leg, anything with a leg and a bone popping out from real life to movies. When she's running on the beach and she's so desperate to find her son, and then boom, your leg breaks, and it's like, damn. You see it. I think that's one of the more. I mean, this movie has some really scenes where it really shocks you. I think we mentioned Benigna's jaw, and then we see Tomas at the end, and then you also see, you see Simone at the end, but you see Tomas's face of his deformity. Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of really good, from a practical effects sort of sense. Yeah, they really pull off those effects for sure.
I was really expecting the lighthouse to have a bigger significance. Like, we never even went there. I was hoping for like there's some secret in the lighthouse or something. You'd think, look for my kid everywhere on this island. She didn't even check the lighthouse.
I think that's why when I read that this movie kind of took a different direction, I wonder, I mean, a $4 million budget, I don't know how much they filmed, but I wonder how much of this movie's, like the initial concepts were they're going to go a different direction. Because I think they kind of introduce a lot of different players into it. And the lighthouse, like the beginning scene is so memorable. She's like going out of her way to reassure her kid that he's safe using the lighthouse. And then there's no other significance of it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Just nitpicking. Interesting. Was not expecting a 6-month time jump to the bereavement group. That was right there, and I'm thinking like, oh, he's not coming back. Like, that's not good. But yeah, that was dark. And then the cops can't find Benigna. Like, I like the cop liaison who they're always kind of shitting on. Like, do your job. Like, The medium's giving us answers. Why aren't you giving us answers?
Yeah, well, I think her name's Pilar.
Yeah,
Oh
Pilar.
my god, they just shit on her so bad. And it's like I don't know if she's definitely I don't think she's a detective, but she's yeah, like you said, a liaison. And she's really invested in the family and she's really trying to help them. And then Laura is not having any of it. She's just let me go with find a medium and go spiritual. But no, I think they're supposed to, yeah, definitely trying to represent the rationality of loss and the rationality of grief.
Yeah.
And sort of, I definitely for Carlos, the husband, as well, the rest kind of represent that. But I think it really is like a train wreck, sort of all hope is lost that, Simone is ever going to be found is whenever you see her, they're looking so hard for this lady. You see her in the middle of the street and then you call out her name. You think everything's going to go well. And then boom, literally an ambulance crushes her. Yeah, it's crazy.
Weird that she was pushing a doll around. Like, clearly she's never recovered from what happened.
Yeah, the doll is like her son, and it's terrible. I actually think in this rewatch though, I caught that. I think that doll, when Laura is uncovering she's returning the house, the orphanage to its status of orphanage and how she remembers it as a kid. One of the dolls is missing, and it's Tomas's doll that she was pushing around in the bassinet carrier thing. And so it's like adds more nuance that she knows certain, like Benigna definitely knew certain things in the house, hidden things. And so I didn't catch that the first times. And then I saw that and I was like, oh, he's the missing doll. Like he's one of the kids that was there and she kept him, it's just grief. It's terrible.
Yeah, that was very dark. So with that, she has no more leads. Like that was all she had. So she gets to a medium. And I love that even in like a Spanish cultured film, the medium or the exorcist always has some sort of intern. They even, reminded me of The Conjuring and Insidious. There's always like some dude monitoring the computers whenever the exorcist is doing their job. I love that that's just a constant thing.
Yeah, it's the nerdy tech intern who's like, oh, he's not too sure because he likes technology, so he's a little bit more rational, but he's still hearing all these things and he's a throwaway character.
Enrique.
No, yeah, I got that too. I'm like, okay, I didn't. Yeah, he's just an archetype sort of thing.
But the medium scene was done very well. Just tracing her movements through the blueprint. I thought that was a cool touch. And then just hearing the kids over the computers was creepy. And then she just kind of got like boomeranged is the word. I don't know why I said horseshoe. Boomeranged back to the bedroom. And that was like, did she even go? Like, what just happened? It was
that scene, and then just the final act with Laura, setting back the house, and it's night. Like you still are reminded that hey, this is very much a horror movie. This is very much a haunted house movie of, especially with the 1, 2, 3, look at the wall and then you turn away. Like, oh my god, those scenes are so chilling and
shit.
Yeah, it still does its good job as a horror movie.
That reminded me so much of the hide and go clap from The Conjuring. Mm-hmm. Just child games in horror movies always freak me out. I hate them. It's always like, it happens in threes. On the third go, some freaky shit's gonna happen. Without fail, happened in this one. On the third, there's the kids.
Yeah, it plays on those cliches well, though. But no, I definitely, I think that's the terrifyingness of kids. Like, you think of like the Freddy song, and kids singing, kids jump roping, it's super like gentle things, and then they're turned and kind of made into a horror trope. Yeah, it definitely makes me never want to play any sort of game with my children.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know when the kind of the horrification of children began in horror movies. I think like maybe like Village of the Damned comes to mind, but just it's innocence corrupted by darkness, and that's why we get so freaked out by it, because it's like what's the difference between that kid and my kid? Like, could my kid be the Antichrist? I don't know. Like. It's one of those just constants in horror that you can always rely on to be scary.
Yeah, kids screaming, kids yelling. My kid teething made me feel like I was living with something paranormal because the screams that came out of that child were not of this world.
Have you ever
So
seen
no,
It's Alive?
no, I have not.
It's basically like what if a baby had like demonic power strength, and it's like she gives birth to a baby and like the baby kills everybody in the operating room, and it's the ultimate evil baby story. It's fucking crazy.
No, I have to watch it.
um so yeah, with that, I guess we're led to the end of this thing, which is a fucking gut punch. And I'm so glad I didn't know the ending beforehand. My buddy Caleb, who often co-hosts this show, he had been told the ending. He's never seen the movie, but he's been told the ending, and he was so pissed. And I get it. I mean, I audibly went, "Oh my god!" when the pieces started coming together. Like the punch is so essential to really like appreciating the film, and it's so basic too. It's just he was angry. He went and hid in the room. She accidentally locked it. He got trapped in the walls. Oh my god.
Yeah, you feel for this family and you feel for Laura and um her like she's scarfing down the pills and to get Tomas back because she's kind of in between the planes. They kind of talk about living between the spirit plane and living in the living plane. And so she finds Simone alive, but he's a spirit, he's cold. And then she realizes they go back sort of the earthly plane, and then he's she sees his corpse for the first time, and it's like it just ruins her. And then you also see that she goes back to that sort of spirit plane when she takes her own life. And it was the way that they kind of showcase that of her like being in the room where all the kids were, and it's back to her childhood, but she's with her own child and she's reconnecting to them, and they're there surrounding her. It's really, yeah, it's really, you feel for her because she's finally connected back with the kids that that influenced her to start a home for kids with special needs, but also her own child. And yeah, you feel for her, but also just kind of like, okay, it's content for her that she's at peace, I guess. And I think that's showcased with the necklace falls off of her, the St. Anthony necklace. And so yeah, with me, like St. Anthony is like culturally, I grew up Catholic, so St. Anthony, you pray to him when you lost anything. And he's supposed to help you find it. And then the necklace falls when she finally finds her son, and it's sort of that symbolism, but she's finally there. Yeah, that definitely cut deep. I was like, wow, I didn't expect to be like, yeah, so gut punched by this movie.
I didn't look anything up. I'm glad I didn't. With horror movies, I definitely believe in going in blind as much as you can. I thought it was interesting that they brought back the doppelganger thing they addressed mid film when she sees her younger self outside. It's like, oh, she's about to die. Oh man. And just seeing like Tomas's little house, as Simone called it, and just seeing all of Tomas's drawings and the mask. It's like this kid was locked away for being different, and it's so fucking sad. And now he can find peace in the other world, where she's going to basically be, Wendy telling these kids stories. It was depressing, but it was a very well done ending. I was surprised.
Yeah, no, she definitely is the Wendy of the story, and that I think that yeah, the connections to Peter Pan and using it from that framework of being a forever child and these kids who are orphans who are murdered, um, and then her being that figure to take care of them. It's like it ties into the themes of grief and motherhood, and this movie is about a grieving mother and her story. Definitely. So I think that all it ties in perfect to her being that maternal figure for all those kids.
Yeah, straight up. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. Here are some Filmgazm facts for The Orphanage. Number one, I thought this was nuts. This was the highest grossing film in Spain in 2007, outperforming Shrek 3 and Pirates of the Caribbean 3. This was the biggest movie in 2007 in Spain. That's awesome. Horror movies never get those honors.
No, Shrek 3, I can't imagine, dude. Any family movies, like they just kill the box office. So no, that speaks to this movie for sure.
Next, Overawed at being in the company of acting veteran Geraldine Chaplin, J.A. Bayona broke the ice on her first day by hiding under a bed and grabbing her leg when she knelt down in the dark. Chaplin's scream in the film is one of genuine surprise. I love that. It's like, this is such a legendary actress. I'm going to fuck with her. I just get under the bed and be like, ah! Like, that could have gone so south.
Yeah, like, oh, do you know who my father was? And no, I think that takes guts. And no, that seems awesome. I think the cast, I think the behind the scenes work from a director never gets really told, but I think they really are responsible for sort of creating that cohesiveness that you see on the screen. But no, that's awesome that he did that. Yeah, he's definitely, I want to look into more of his works because I've realized that, yeah, I really like this movie. So I kind of want to see what he does later.
I've heard The Impossible is very good. I've been wanting to check that out. I'm a big Naomi Watts fan anyway, so that one's on my list. Number 3, when writer Sergio Sanchez told the little girl who plays the blind orphan that she had pretty eyes, she replied, "Oh, do you like them? I picked them out myself." What he didn't know, she was diagnosed at a very young age with a degenerative eye disease that was going to leave her blind. One of the last things her parents did while she could still see was let her see a big selection of glass eyes and choose the one she wanted. So she picked out her eyes herself. That's interesting.
That's awesome that they actually got a blind person to play a blind character, though. I think if you're, we were talking about disability studies, but I wonder how sort of people in that field would think about this movie, because I don't think it represents disabled children in a light that's negative, but I would be interested to see kind of the discussions about that.
I think a very interesting journal article could be a disability study on this film. Yeah, like I wonder if somebody's already tried that. If not, anybody listening to this, that's mine.
No, definitely. Dibs.
I give The Orphanage an 8. It's very eerie, well acted. The ending's going to stay with me forever, and it's surprisingly progressive. So yeah, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, this is a solid 9 for me. This is one of my favorite horror movies because it checks so many boxes. It's horror. It's a tragedy. It's sort of a more murder mystery at times. It's a ghost thriller. It checks a lot of boxes, and I think that I'm able to, you're able to really connect to the characters. But no, definitely solid 9.
Sweet, I can tell. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you like the show, feel free to follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the moment. We're at Filmgazm Productions. If you want to suggest films for us to check out, you can always send us a message on the socials or email us at filmgazm@gmail.com. We love recommendations. We've done a couple of them. If you want to support the show, you can click on support this podcast on your podcast provider. We appreciate anything you feel like we deserve. Next week is going to be a good one. We go back into the mind of Stephen King. We see the release of the latest adaptation of Stephen King's sci-fi horror epic Firestarter. So we're going back to the 1984 original here on Filmgazm. When a government experiment on 2 college students results in a powerful child who can manipulate fire with her mind, Father Andy McGee must protect his daughter Charlie at any cost when the government agency The Shop starts hunting them down. Though a box office bomb and reviled by critics and fans alike upon release, we're hoping we can find something in the original Firestarter just in time for the remake to hopefully live up to fans' expectations. I happen to like the original Firestarter, but I totally get why people hate it. For starters, George C. Scott plays a Native American, so right off the bat, that's going to alienate a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I definitely need to delve more into older Stephen King movies, but no, I definitely, sounds intriguing. I feel like I've seen clips, but never the whole thing, but it's on the list. There's a large list of the movies I need to work through. No, I'm interested to see what your takes are.
Yeah, it stars a young, 10-year-old Drew Barrymore as Charlie, right off of E.T. George C. Scott as John Rainbird. It's never going to sit right with me. The book is so good that the movie deserved to be better, and the new one looks like it's going to be on par. So I'm hoping, but yeah, I'm going to revisit the original, and Caleb and I are going to mock the fuck out of it because, again, I cannot stress this enough. George C. Scott plays a Native American. They literally just gave him black hair.
Oh God, that
It's
is
fucking
the
embarrassing.
worst. No, that is the worst. Now, well-deserved critiques, I'm sure are coming.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun. Don't miss Ben Affleck's Daredevil on Fridays Beyond the Bad, Sam Raimi's A Simple Plan on Oscar Sunday, and Marvel's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness on Monday's sneak preview. And Daredevil, I am looking forward to that one because I feel like I have to defend it because I do like that movie.
Please defend the soundtrack. I don't care what anyone says. The soundtrack is so good. If you like anything 2000s dirty stepdad rock, you know what I'm talking about. You know the Daredevil soundtrack, and that's one of my like childhood movies that I really remember watching a lot. Now as an adult, I do, think it's terrible as far as comic book movies go. But Michael Clark Duncan is one of my favorite actors. R.I.P. the GOAT, and his Kingpin is severely underrated. So,
dude, his introduction with that song "Lap Dance" by Nerd playing, and like just the pan up of like this is the guy who runs New York City. God damn, I love Michael Clark Duncan, and Kingpin might be my favorite role of his. I love The Green Mile, but watching him kick ass in New York as the boss.
No, super believable. Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah, I'll save my big thoughts for Friday, but I am looking forward to doing Daredevil. Always fun shitting on superhero movies. Until then, don't try to renovate a spooky old orphanage, and pay attention when your kids want to show you a little room they found. If you don't have kids, just keep watching movies.